It was a simple day, the kind that blends into the background of life without much fanfare. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets of Maple Street. A gentle breeze carried the scent of freshly baked bread from the bakery down the road, mingling with the faint aroma of coffee wafting out of Joe's diner. For Sarah, this was her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the chaos of her thoughts and find comfort in familiarity. Sarah had lived in this small town for nearly 5 years now. Before that, she'd worked as an executive assistant at a high-profile firm in the city. Her days back then were filled with deadlines, late-night meetings, and endless emails. But after a particularly grueling year, she decided to leave it all behind. She wanted something quieter, simpler, something real. So she packed her bags, moved to this sleepy little town, and started over. Life here wasn't easy. Sarah worked 2 part-time jobs just to keep herself afloat, one at a local bookstore and another cleaning offices at night. Money was tight, but she didn't mind. There was a certain charm to this town that money couldn't buy. People knew each other by name, smiled when they passed on the street, and always seemed ready to lend a helping hand. It was a far cry from the impersonal hustle of the city, and Sarah loved it. Every morning, rain or shine, Sarah would visit Joe's diner. It was her routine, her ritual. She'd sit in the same booth near the window, order the same meal, scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee, and watch the world go by. Sometimes she'd chat with Joe, the owner, about the weather or the latest gossip around town. Other times, she'd simply enjoy the quiet hum of conversation around her. It was peaceful, predictable, and exactly what she needed. But today felt different. As Sarah pushed open the diner's door, a bell jingled overhead, signaling her arrival. She stepped inside, greeted by the warm glow of yellow lights and the comforting smell of bacon sizzling on the grill. The usual crowd was there, the elderly couple who always sat by the counter, the construction workers sharing jokes over pancakes, and the college student typing furiously on his laptop in the corner. Everything seemed normal, yet something in the air made Sarah pause. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on a figure sitting alone by the window. He was an older man, probably in his late 70s, with thinning gray hair and a weathered face. His clothes were worn, patched in places, and he looked out of place among the cheerful chatter of the diner. No one seemed to notice him. He blended into the background like a ghost. Sarah hesitated for a moment, unsure why this stranger caught her attention. Maybe it was the way he stared blankly at the menu, as though overwhelmed by the choices. Or maybe it was the sadness etched into every line of his face. Whatever it was, it tugged at her heartstrings. She ordered her breakfast and took her usual seat, but her gaze kept drifting back to the man. After a few minutes, she noticed him approach the counter. He hesitated, glancing at the prices listed on the chalkboard menu. Then slowly he reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of crumpled bills. He counted them carefully, his lips moving silently as if calculating whether he had enough. Finally, he sighed and placed the money on the counter. "Just a cup of coffee, please," he muttered, his voice barely audible. Something stirred within Sarah. She didn't know this man, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he needed more than just coffee. Without thinking twice, she stood up and walked over to the counter. "Excuse me," she said softly, catching both the man's and the cashier's attention. "Let me get that for you." The man turned to look at her, surprise flickering in his tired eyes. "Oh no, miss, I couldn't ask you to do that," he protested weakly. "It's no trouble," Sarah insisted, placing a few extra dollars on the counter. "Get yourself a proper meal, you look like you could use it." For a moment the man just stared at her as if trying to decide whether to trust her. Then his shoulders sagged and he nodded gratefully. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You're very kind." Sarah smiled warmly. "Don't mention it. We've all been there." The man took his tray and found a seat by the window. Sarah returned to her table, brushing off the encounter as nothing more than a random act of kindness. She didn't think much of it. After all, it wasn't the first time she'd helped someone in need. What she didn't realize was that this seemingly ordinary interaction would set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. As Sarah ate her breakfast, she occasionally glanced at the man. He ate slowly, savoring each bite as though it were a rare luxury. At one point, he caught her looking and gave her a small, grateful smile. She nodded politely and went back to her meal, unaware that this stranger was about to reveal a secret that would turn her world upside down. Little did Sarah know, this unassuming morning at Joe's diner was only the beginning of an extraordinary journey. The man she had helped was not just any passerby. He carried with him a mystery that would challenge everything Sarah thought she knew about life, fate, and the power of kindness. And soon, she would discover that even the smallest gestures can have the biggest impact. The diner buzzed with its usual morning energy, but Sarah's mind kept drifting back to the elderly man sitting by the window. There was something about him that lingered in her thoughts, like an unanswered question tugging at the edges of her awareness. She tried to focus on her scrambled eggs and toast, but her curiosity refused to be ignored. Who was he? Why did he seem so out of place here? And why did helping him feel so significant? As she sipped her coffee, the man stood up from his seat and began walking toward her table. His steps were slow but deliberate, each movement weighed down by years of weariness. When he finally reached her, he hesitated for a moment as though unsure whether to speak. Finally, he cleared his throat softly and said, "Miss, may I sit with you for a moment?" Sarah looked up, surprised. She nodded politely and gestured to the seat across from her. "Of course," she replied, setting her fork down. "Is everything all right?" The man lowered himself into the chair, wincing slightly as though his joints protested the movement. He glanced around the diner, his eyes scanning the room as if checking for eavesdroppers. Then, leaning closer to Sarah, he spoke in a hushed tone. "I wanted to thank you again for what you did. Not many people would go out of their way to help a stranger." Sarah shrugged modestly. "It wasn't anything special, just trying to do the right thing." The man studied her face intently, his expression unreadable. For a moment he didn't say anything, and Sarah began to feel uneasy. Was there something wrong? Did he need more help? Before she could ask, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a napkin. It was crumpled and stained with coffee rings, but it carried an air of importance as he unfolded it carefully. "This is for you," he said, sliding the napkin across the table. On it were written rows of numbers, long strings of digits that seemed random at first glance. Sarah frowned, confused. "What is this?" she asked. The man leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on her. "You'll understand soon enough," he said cryptically. "But remember this. What you've done today, it wasn't just kindness, it was fate." Sarah blinked, taken aback. "Fate? What are you talking about?" Instead of answering, the man stood up abruptly. "Use it wisely," he added, his voice firm now. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing through the diner's door before Sarah could stop him. For several minutes, Sarah sat frozen in her seat, staring at the napkin in front of her. The numbers meant nothing to her, they were just a jumble of digits scrawled hastily on paper. Was this some kind of prank? Or maybe the man was confused or unwell. Either way, it didn't make sense. Yet, despite her confusion, she couldn't bring herself to dismiss it entirely. Something about the encounter felt profound. When she finally left the diner, the napkin tucked safely in her pocket, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she'd stumbled onto something extraordinary. Her day passed in a blur of routine tasks, stocking shelves at the bookstore, cleaning offices late into the evening. But her mind kept circling back to the mysterious man and his cryptic message. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Sarah decided to investigate further. Pulling the napkin out of her jacket pocket, she examined it under the soft glow of her bedside lamp. The numbers still looked meaningless, but she noticed something peculiar. They weren't arranged randomly. There was a pattern to them, almost, like a code waiting to be cracked. Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah grabbed her laptop and began searching online. At first, she typed the entire sequence into a search engine, hoping for some clue. Nothing came up. Frustrated but undeterred, she broke the numbers into smaller groups, entering them one by one. Still, no results. She even consulted forums, dedicated to cryptography and puzzles, posting screenshots of the napkin in hopes that someone might recognize the pattern. But hours passed and her efforts yielded nothing. Just as she was about to give up, a thought occurred to her. What if the order of the numbers mattered? Tentatively, she reversed the sequence and entered it into the search bar. To her astonishment, her screen lit up with a notification. It wasn't from a website or forum. It was from her bank app. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she opened the app. The interface displayed her account information, but the balance caught her breath. Millions of dollars had appeared in her account, seemingly out of nowhere. She stared at the screen, her hands trembling. How was this possible? Where had the money come from? And how did those numbers connect to her bank account? Panic and excitement warred within her as she scrolled through the transaction details. The deposit was labeled only as transfer initiated, with no sender information attached. It was as if the money had materialized on its own. Sarah double-checked her account settings, logged out, and logged back in, convinced it must be a glitch. But the numbers remained unchanged. Her mind raced with questions. Who was the man who gave her the napkin? Why had he chosen her? And what did he mean when he said it was fate? The answers eluded her, but one thing was certain. Her life would never be the same again. Over the next few days, Sarah wrestled with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to report the money to the authorities, fearing it might be stolen or tied to something illegal. Another part argued that she deserved it, that her act of kindness had somehow earned her this incredible gift. After all, hadn't the man implied it was meant for her? Despite her uncertainty, Sarah couldn't ignore the opportunities this newfound wealth presented. For years, she'd struggled to make ends meet, always putting others' needs ahead of her own. Now, for the first time, she had the means to change not only her life but also the lives of those around her. The idea filled her with both hope and responsibility. One evening, as she sat at her kitchen table staring at the napkin, Sarah made a decision. She wouldn't let fear dictate her actions. Instead, she would use the money wisely, honoring the spirit of kindness that had brought it into her life. Whatever mystery surrounded the man and his cryptic message, she resolved to embrace it, not as a burden, but as a chance to do good in the world. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. The man's words echoed in her mind. You'll understand soon enough. As Sarah drifted off to sleep that night, she wondered what other secrets lay hidden behind those numbers, and how far this journey would take her. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. She dressed quickly, eager to start exploring the possibilities ahead. Stepping outside, she felt the crisp autumn air fill her lungs, carrying with it the promise of change. Somewhere out there, the man who called himself Henry was watching, or so she hoped. Whoever he was, whatever his intentions, Sarah knew one thing for sure. Her life had been touched by something extraordinary, and she was ready to see where it would lead. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah. Each morning, she woke up expecting the money in her account to vanish, like some cruel trick played by fate. But every time she checked her bank app, the staggering balance remained unchanged, millions of dollars just sitting there waiting for her to decide what to do with it. The weight of this responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders, but so did the excitement of endless possibilities. At first, Sarah tried to keep the discovery to herself. She didn't want to draw attention or risk being taken advantage of. After all, who would believe her story? A stranger hands her a napkin with numbers and suddenly millions appear in her bank account. It sounded absurd, even to her own ears. So she continued living her life as if nothing had changed. By day, she worked at the bookstore and cleaned offices. By night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering what to do next. But secrets, have a way of bubbling to the surface, especially when they're tied to something as extraordinary as sudden wealth. One evening, while stocking shelves at the bookstore, Sarah overheard two customers chatting about a local family struggling to pay their medical bills. The mother had been diagnosed with cancer, and the mounting expenses had left them on the brink of losing their home. Sarah's heart ached as she listened, imagining the fear and desperation they must be feeling. That night, unable to shake the conversation from her mind, Sarah sat down at her laptop and researched the family. She found a GoFundMe page set up by friends and neighbors detailing their plight. Without hesitation, she transferred a significant sum of money into the campaign anonymously. When the funds appeared overnight, the community erupted in gratitude, marveling at the mysterious benefactor who had stepped in just in time. It wasn't long before similar stories began surfacing around town. A struggling single father received enough money to start his own business. An elderly woman was able to save her house from foreclosure. A group of high school students raised enough funds to attend a national science competition. Each act of generosity came without fanfare or recognition, leaving everyone baffled about the identity of the secret donor. Sarah reveled in the joy these acts brought to others, but she also wrestled with guilt. Was it selfish to stay hidden? Shouldn't people know where the money was coming from? Yet deep down she knew anonymity was the right choice, for now at least. She didn't want the spotlight or the pressure that came with it. All she wanted was to make a difference, quietly and humbly, just as she had done when she helped the elderly man at the diner. As word spread about the mysterious benefactor, speculation ran rampant. Some believed it was a wealthy philanthropist passing through town. Others thought it might be a government program testing new ways to distribute aid. A few even joked that aliens had descended upon Maple Street to reward its residents for their kindness. The truth, however, remained elusive. Despite her efforts to remain invisible, Sarah couldn't avoid drawing attention forever. One chilly afternoon, while walking home from work, she noticed a reporter standing outside Joe's diner, interviewing patrons. Curious, she slowed her pace and listened from a distance. "Whoever this person is," one customer said, "they've changed our town for the better. People are smiling again. Businesses are thriving. It's like we've been given a second chance." Another chimed in. "I heard it started after someone helped an old man at the diner. Maybe that's connected somehow." Sarah's stomach tightened. Had her simple act of kindness truly sparked such a chain reaction? And if so, how far would it reach? Her fears were confirmed later that week when the reporter approached her directly. Sarah had stopped by the bakery to pick up a loaf of bread when the young woman cornered her near the counter. "Excuse me," the reporter said, holding out a microphone. "Are you Sarah Bennett?" Caught off guard, Sarah nodded cautiously. "Yes, that's me. Why?" "We've been investigating the recent wave of charitable donations sweeping through town," the reporter explained, her eyes gleaming with curiosity. "Sources say you may be involved. Can you tell us anything about it?" Sarah felt her cheeks flush. She hadn't anticipated being put on the spot like this. For a moment she considered denying everything, but something told her honesty was the better option. Taking a deep breath, she replied, "Look, I don't want any credit for what's happening. I saw an opportunity to help and I took it, that's all." The reporter scribbled furiously in her notebook. "So you admit you're behind these donations?" "No," Sarah corrected gently. "I'm not behind them entirely. I'm just part of it. Someone once showed me kindness when I needed it most, and I guess I'm paying it forward." The reporter smiled knowingly. "Well, whoever you are, the town owes you a debt of gratitude. Do you mind if I write about this?" Before Sarah could respond, the reporter snapped a photo of her and hurried away, leaving her standing there stunned. Within hours, the story went viral. Local news outlets picked it up, then regional ones, and eventually national media caught wind of the mystery millionaire of Maple Street. Reporters flocked to the small town, eager to uncover the identity of the elusive benefactor. Sarah found herself thrust into the limelight, something she had never wanted. Cameras flashed in her face, microphones were shoved toward her lips, and strangers stopped her on the street to thank her. At first, she tried to deflect the attention, insisting she was just an ordinary person doing what anyone else would do. But the more she resisted, the more determined people became to celebrate her. Amid the chaos, Sarah often thought back to the elderly man, Henry, and wondered if he had foreseen all this. Had he known the ripple effect his gift would create? Did he plan for her to become a symbol of hope and generosity? Or was this merely the result of aligning her actions with the values he seemed to embody? One evening, overwhelmed by the constant scrutiny, Sarah returned to Joe's diner seeking solace in its familiar warmth. As she slid into her usual booth, Joe himself approached her, concern etched on his weathered face. "You all right, Sarah?" he asked, setting a cup of coffee in front of her. She sighed, wrapping her hands around the mug. "I don't know, Joe. Everything's moving so fast. I never asked for any of this." Joe nodded sympathetically. "Sometimes life gives us opportunities we didn't expect. Doesn't mean we can't rise to the occasion." His words struck a chord within her. Maybe this was her purpose, to use the gift she'd been given to make the world a little brighter. With renewed resolve, Sarah decided to lean into her role as a force for good, embracing both the challenges and rewards it brought. Over the following weeks, she expanded her efforts beyond Maple Street. She funded scholarships for underprivileged students, supported struggling artists, and even donated to environmental causes close to her heart. Each project filled her with a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. Yet no matter how much she gave, the balance in her account barely seemed to dwindle. It was as if the money replenished itself, defying logic and reason. Still, questions lingered in Sarah's mind. Who was Henry? How had he orchestrated such an elaborate scheme? And why had he chosen her? These mysteries gnawed at her, fueling her determination to find answers. She scoured online databases, hired private investigators, and reached out to experts in cryptography, hoping to uncover the truth behind the numbers on that fateful napkin. Her search led her down countless rabbit holes, each more perplexing than the last. Some suggested the numbers were linked to advanced algorithms used by tech companies. Others speculated they were coordinates pointing to hidden treasures buried across the globe. One theory even proposed they were part of an alien communication system, a notion Sarah dismissed outright. Yet despite her exhaustive efforts, the origin of the money remained shrouded in mystery. It was as if Henry had vanished into thin air, leaving behind only fragments of clues and a legacy of kindness for Sarah to carry forward. As autumn faded into winter, Sarah settled into her new reality. She continued helping those in need, spreading joy wherever she went. Though the questions still haunted her, she learned to live with the uncertainty, trusting that someday the pieces of the puzzle would fall into place. And perhaps that was the true lesson Henry had intended to teach her. That kindness, like destiny, doesn't always come with clear instructions. Sometimes it simply asks us to take the first step, trusting that the path will reveal itself along the way. With the snow beginning to blanket Maple Street, Sarah gazed out her window, reflecting on how much had changed since that ordinary morning at the diner. From a single act of kindness had blossomed a movement, a testament to the power of compassion and the ripple effects it creates. Whatever lay ahead, she knew one thing for certain. She was ready to face it, armed with courage, gratitude, and an unwavering belief in the goodness of humanity. The months rolled by, and Sarah's life transformed in ways she could never have imagined. What started as a quiet existence in a sleepy town had blossomed into something extraordinary, a whirlwind of purpose, gratitude, and responsibility. She no longer worked 2 part-time jobs. Instead, she devoted her days to managing the countless projects she'd funded. From renovating local schools to building community gardens, Sarah became the driving force behind Maple Street's revival. Yet despite her newfound fame and influence, she remained grounded, always remembering the values that had guided her actions from the very beginning. Joe's Diner, once a modest eatery frequented by a handful of regulars, now buzzed with activity. Sarah had invested heavily in its expansion, transforming it into a vibrant hub for the community. The walls were adorned with photographs of smiling faces, people whose lives she'd touched through her generosity. Families gathered there for meals, students studied at the cozy booths, and local musicians performed on weekends. It was more than just a diner now. It was a symbol of hope and unity, a testament to what kindness could achieve. Yet, amidst all the progress, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of unfinished business. Henry's cryptic words echoed in her mind every day. "You'll understand soon enough." But what exactly was she supposed to understand? Despite her relentless search, she still hadn't uncovered any concrete answers about the mysterious man or the origin of the money. It frustrated her, but it also intrigued her. Deep down, she sensed that this mystery wasn't just about wealth. It was about something far greater. One crisp winter morning, Sarah decided to visit the diner early, hoping to clear her thoughts over a cup of coffee. As she pushed open the door, the familiar jingle of the bell greeted her. The place was nearly empty, save for a few patrons nursing their drinks in silence. Joe waved from behind the counter, motioning for her to take her usual seat by the window. She smiled and slid into the booth, grateful for the quiet solitude. As she sipped her coffee, her eyes wandered to the napkin tucked inside her jacket pocket, the same one Henry had given her months ago. She pulled it out and unfolded it, staring at the numbers scrawled across its surface. They had become etched in her memory, yet they still held secrets she couldn't decipher. Frustrated, she sighed and placed it back in her pocket, only to notice something unusual. On closer inspection, she realized the napkin felt thicker than before. Confused, she held it up to the light and gasped. There was writing on the other side, faint, almost invisible markings that hadn't been there earlier. Her heart raced as she squinted to make out the words. They were small, handwritten notes, barely legible. Kindness is the key. Trust your instincts. The journey is not over. Sarah's pulse quickened. How had these words appeared? Had they always been there, hidden beneath layers of time and wear? Or had someone or something added them recently? She glanced around the diner, half expecting to see Henry sitting nearby, watching her with his knowing smile. But the room remained empty, save for the soft hum of conversation and the clinking of dishes. Her mind spun with possibilities. Was this another clue? A message meant to guide her forward? Determined to uncover the truth, Sarah decided to follow the instructions written on the napkin. If kindness truly was the key, then perhaps the next step lay in continuing her mission, but on a larger scale. Over the next few weeks, Sarah expanded her efforts beyond Maple Street. She traveled to neighboring towns, meeting people who faced challenges similar to those she'd encountered in her own life. In one town, she met a young girl named Lily, whose family struggled to afford medical treatment for her rare condition. Inspired by the resilience of the child, Sarah established a foundation dedicated to funding research for rare diseases. In another town, she discovered a group of unemployed factory workers desperate to learn new skills. With her resources, she set up vocational training programs, empowering them to rebuild their lives. Each project brought her closer to understanding the deeper meaning behind Henry's gift. It wasn't just about money, it was about connection, empathy, and the transformative power of human kindness. Every act of generosity created ripples, inspiring others to pay it forward in their own unique ways. Slowly but surely, Sarah began to see herself as part of something much bigger, a global movement fueled by compassion and shared humanity. But along with the joy came challenges. Not everyone viewed her actions favorably. Some accused her of seeking attention or using her wealth for personal gain. Others dismissed her efforts as naive, claiming that true change required systemic reform rather than individual acts of charity. At times, the criticism stung, making her question whether she was doing enough or doing it right. During one particularly difficult week, Sarah found herself overwhelmed by doubt. She sat alone in her apartment, staring at the blank wall, wondering if she should retreat from the public eye altogether. Just as she was about to call it quits, her phone rang. It was an unknown number, and though she hesitated, she answered. "Anyway, hello?" she said cautiously. A gravelly voice responded. "Miss Bennett, I've been watching you. Sarah froze. Who is this? There was a pause, followed by a chuckle. Let's just say I'm an old friend. You've done well, Sarah, better than I ever expected. Her breath caught in her throat. Henry? The line went silent for a moment, and then he spoke again. Yes, it's me. I wanted to check in. See how you're handling everything. How are you even calling me? She demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and relief. Where have you been? Why did you give me this money? What do you want from me? Henry chuckled softly, unfazed by her barrage of questions. Patience, my dear. All will be revealed in due time. For now, know this. You're on the right path. Keep trusting your instincts and don't let anyone or anything deter you from your mission. Before Sarah could respond, the line went dead. She stared at her phone, her mind racing. Who was this man? And how did he always seem to stay one step ahead? More importantly, why had he chosen her? Despite the lingering questions, Henry's words reassured her. Whatever doubts she harbored, whatever obstacles she faced, she knew she couldn't give up, not when so many people depended on her. She resolved to push forward, embracing both the triumphs and trials that came her way. As spring approached, Sarah organized a grand event to celebrate the impact of her work thus far. Held at the newly renovated community center, the gathering brought together hundreds of people whose lives she had touched. Speeches were delivered, tears were shed, and laughter filled the air. For the first time in months, Sarah allowed herself to bask in the joy of what she had accomplished. Yet, as she stood on stage addressing the crowd, she couldn't help but feel that this chapter of her life was drawing to a close. Somewhere out there, Henry was waiting, watching, and she knew the journey was far from over. The napkin's message lingered in her mind. The journey is not over. With renewed determination, Sarah vowed to continue exploring the mysteries surrounding her gift. She didn't know where it would lead, but she trusted that each step would bring her closer to the truth. After all, life had taught her one invaluable lesson. Sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the simplest acts of kindness. As the sun set over Maple Street, casting golden hues across the horizon, Sarah gazed out at the bustling town. Below, from a single act of compassion had emerged a legacy, a reminder that even the smallest gestures can ignite powerful change. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready to embrace it, armed with courage, curiosity, and an unshakable belief in the boundless potential of the human spirit. Years had passed since that fateful morning at Joe's diner, and Sarah's life bore little resemblance to the quiet, unassuming existence she once led. What started as a single act of kindness had blossomed into a global movement, a testament to the ripple effects of compassion and generosity. Her name was now synonymous with hope, her story told in classrooms, community centers, and even international conferences. Yet despite her fame, Sarah remained humble, always remembering the values that had guided her journey from the very beginning. Maple Street had transformed beyond recognition. Once a sleepy, overlooked town, it was now a thriving hub of innovation and goodwill. The diner where it all began stood proudly at its heart, bustling with activity day and night. Its walls were covered with photographs of smiling faces, people whose lives Sarah had touched directly or indirectly. Students studied in cozy booths, families shared meals together, and local artists showcased their work on weekends. It was more than just a diner. It was a symbol of unity, resilience, and the power of kindness. Yet for all the progress she'd made, Sarah couldn't escape the feeling that her journey wasn't complete. Henry's cryptic messages still haunted her, urging her to trust her instincts and reminding her that the journey was far from over. Despite countless attempts to uncover his identity, or even confirm if he was real, she had found no answers. Was he an ordinary man with extraordinary resources, a guardian angel sent to guide her, or perhaps something else entirely? Whatever. The truth, Sarah knew one thing for certain. He had set her on this path, and she owed it to him, and to herself, to see it through. One crisp autumn evening, as golden leaves swirled in the wind, Sarah returned to the diner after a long day of meetings. She slid into her usual booth by the window, savoring the familiar warmth of the place. Joe greeted her with a nod, setting a steaming cup of coffee in front of her. "You look tired," he said gently. "Need a break?" Sarah smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I don't think I'll ever stop." Joe chuckled, patting her shoulder. "That's what makes you who you are." As she sipped her coffee, her gaze drifted to the napkin tucked inside her jacket pocket, the same one Henry had given her years ago. She pulled it out absent-mindedly, tracing the faded numbers with her fingertips. Over time, the markings had grown fainter, almost as though they were meant to disappear entirely. But the final message remained clear. The journey is not over. Suddenly, a young woman approached her table, hesitating nervously. She looked barely out of her teens, her clothes worn and her face pale with exhaustion. In her hands, she clutched a crumpled piece of paper. "Excuse me, ma'am," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you have a moment?" Sarah looked up, startled. Something about the girl's demeanor reminded her of herself years ago. Young, uncertain, carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. She gestured for the girl to sit. "Of course. What's wrong?" The girl hesitated, glancing around, as though afraid someone might overhear. Then slowly, she placed the paper on the table. "This belongs to you," she said softly. Sarah stared at the paper, her breath catching in her throat. It was another napkin, identical to the one she held in her hand. On it were written rows of numbers, long strings of digits arranged in patterns eerily similar to the ones Henry had given her. Her mind raced as she tried to process what she was seeing. "Where did you get this?" she asked, her voice trembling. The girl shrugged helplessly. "A man gave it to me. He said you'd understand." "A man?" Sarah pressed, leaning forward urgently. "What did he look like?" "He was older, with gray hair," the girl replied. "Kind eyes. He told me to find you, said you'd know what to do." Sarah's heart pounded as she realized the implications. Could it be Henry? Had he finally resurfaced after all these years? Questions flooded her mind, but she forced herself to focus on the girl in front of her. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Emma," the girl replied. "And why did he send you to me?" Emma hesitated, then spoke haltingly. "I lost my job last month. My mom's sick and we can't afford her treatment. I didn't know what else to do. The man said you could help." Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat. This was exactly how her own journey had begun, with a stranger in need. Without hesitation, she reached across the table and took Emma's hand. "Don't worry," she said firmly. "We'll figure this out together." Over the next few days, Sarah helped Emma navigate the challenges she faced. She arranged for medical assistance for Emma's mother, secured temporary housing for the family, and even enrolled Emma in a vocational training program to help her build a better future. Through it all, she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was significant, that it marked the beginning of a new chapter in her journey. Meanwhile, the second napkin weighed heavily on her mind. Like the first, it carried an air of mystery, its purpose unclear. Determined to uncover its secrets, Sarah spent hours studying the numbers, searching for patterns or hidden meanings. Just as before, the sequence seemed random at first glance, but when reversed, it unlocked something astonishing. This time, however, it wasn't money that appeared in her account. Instead, she received access to a secure online database containing detailed plans for innovative projects designed to tackle some of the world's most pressing issues: climate change, poverty alleviation, education reform, and more. Each project came with step-by-step instructions, funding allocations, and timelines. It was as if someone had meticulously mapped out solutions to humanity's greatest challenges, leaving them in Sarah's hands to execute. Overwhelmed but inspired, Sarah realized that this was the culmination of everything she had worked toward. Henry, or whoever he was, had entrusted her with the tools to create lasting change on a global scale. With renewed determination, Sarah threw herself into implementing the projects outlined in the database. She partnered with governments, NGOs, and private organizations to bring these initiatives to life. Solar farms sprang up in remote villages, providing clean energy to communities that had never known electricity. Schools were built in war-torn regions, offering children a chance at a brighter future. Sustainable farming practices were introduced worldwide, helping combat food insecurity while preserving the environment. As the projects gained momentum, so too did public awareness of Sarah's efforts. Media outlets hailed her as a visionary, leader, a modern-day hero tackling the planet's toughest problems. Yet, Sarah refused to take credit. In every interview, at every event, she emphasized the importance of collective action. "This isn't about me," she would say. "It's about all of us working together to build a better world." Despite her success, Sarah often thought back to Henry and wondered if she would ever see him again. Who was he really? And why had he chosen her to carry this immense responsibility? Though the questions lingered, she came to accept that some mysteries might never be solved, and that was okay. What mattered most was the impact of her actions, the lives she touched, and the legacy she left behind. One evening, as Sarah prepared to leave the diner after a long day of planning, she noticed a familiar figure sitting alone by the window. Her heart skipped a beat as she approached cautiously. Sure enough, it was Henry, the same weathered face, the same kind eyes. He smiled faintly as she sat down across from him. "You've done well," he said simply, his voice warm yet distant. "Who are you?" Sarah demanded, her tone a mix of frustration and gratitude. "Why did you choose me?" Henry chuckled softly. "Does it matter? You've proven yourself capable of greatness. That's all that matters. But the money, the projects, it all came from you," Sarah insisted. "How did you do it? Why give it to me?" He leaned back in his chair, studying her thoughtfully. "The money was never mine to begin with. It was always meant for people like you, those willing to use it for the greater good. As for why I chose you," he paused, his expression softening. "Because I saw something in you that day at the diner. A spark of kindness. A willingness to help without expecting anything in return. That's rare, Sarah. And it's powerful." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she absorbed his words. For years she had questioned her role in this grand design, doubting whether she was truly worthy of such responsibility. Now, hearing Henry's explanation, she finally understood. It wasn't about her abilities or qualifications. It was about her heart. Before she could respond, Henry stood up abruptly. "Take care of yourself, Sarah," he said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And remember, the journey is never truly over. Keep paying it forward." Then just as suddenly as he had appeared, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd outside. Sarah watched him go, knowing deep down that she would never see him again. But it didn't matter. His message had been delivered and his mission fulfilled. As she gazed out the diner window at the bustling street below, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. From a single act of kindness had emerged a lifetime of purpose. A reminder that even the smallest gestures can ignite powerful change. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready to embrace it, armed with courage, compassion, and an unwavering belief in the boundless potential of the human spirit. Years later, as Sarah sat in her favorite booth at Joe's Diner, surrounded by laughter and chatter, she reflected on how far she had come. Life had taken her on an incredible journey, one filled with challenges, triumphs, and